Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. I'm Gary Polland from the right, and my guest host this week is Jay Aiyer. He's from the left. We have three exciting guests this week,
yes,
Jay.
Very exciting.
First, Mayor Jeff Wagner of Pasadena, along with him, his Chief of Staff and former Houston City Councilman, James Rodriguez, and Jeff Braun, who runs the Fort Bend Office of Emergency Management. Three people that have firsthand information about the Harvey crisis and aftermath.
Well, first off, thank you guys for coming here. Mayor, I know you are a veteran of the Houston Police Department. I know you were the first responders have had to do double duty, triple duty. So before we get too far into it, we want to thank all our first responders for doing an amazing job in helping the recovery and rescue efforts in this area. Mayor, right now I know in the city of Pasadena you're dealing with the aftermath of what's happened with the hurricane. Can you talk a little bit about, sort of from a planning perspective, how you're dealing with it, how you're dealing with the steps afterwards, and in particular, if you could, talk a little bit about some of the issues related to, I think the EPA has come out with some issues related to some toxic questions.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that for us.
Well, in Pasadena, we were prepared for this hurricane. But saying so, with that, we had 5,000 homes damaged. That's a lot of homes in Pasadena. So as soon as the rain stopped, we immediately started picking up debris. We've already gone through our whole city twice. We're on our third trip around the whole city cleaning up debris. So we're trying our very best to get the part of when someone's at their house and look outside their house and seeing everything they own that was damaged. We know that's hard, so we're trying to do our best to get that away from them, to let them know the city actually cares and sees it actually out working. But with first responders, I have to say this, let me go back a little bit. Our first responders are a little different than most everybody's. Our fire department is all volunteer. We had people in our fire department working around the clock, away from their family, for free. And we ran full staff for 7 whole days in all our fire stations. We have 10 stations. And our police department is, to me, being a Houston police officer, it's easy for me to say this, they're outstanding and great first responders. But I'm going to have to give a little extra credit for our volunteer fire departments because they really outshine everybody else by going out and doing what they had to do for free.
That's outstanding. And I did want to ask you, he mentioned the EPA, so let's follow up on that. You have some Superfund sites in Pasadena.
Yes.
The Superfund sites got flooded. There was toxic waste that was released. What is the city going to do about this problem that is not going to go away unless we get rid of the toxic waste sites?
Absolutely. Of course, we want to get rid of it. Why we even have it in our city doesn't make any sense. Remember, that's before my administration.
I understand.
Yeah. But as soon as we heard that news, we immediately called EPA and we immediately had people go out there and test it. And we got the test results back that it's safe. But still, we're still on top of it. You know,
Is there something that you can do with the assistance of the state and with the congressional delegation to basically get EPA to finish the job and get that toxic waste site out of your city?
We will continue to make the phone calls or make the visits because you're exactly right. It's got to go. Yeah. And I want it out of my city for sure.
Okay, Jeff, Fort Bend County. You all had, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Fort Bend County suffered so people understand and kind of where things are at today. I mean, by the way, I'm surprised you can stay awake given the amount of responsibility you have.
Thanks, that's what my wife says. Yeah, surprised I can stay awake. In Fort Bend County, a lot like what the mayor was saying, we've had a lot of damage that we haven't experienced in the past. It was really the storm of the century for Fort Bend County. We have over almost 7,000 homes that are damaged. But it's also tough for us because you have to remember that we've had 4 federally declared disasters in the last 3 years, 3 of them in the last 16 months. And some people have been flooded 2 or 3 times in a row in 16 months. So folks that have just started to rebuild have just found them in the same position as they were before. So the recovery aspect of our situation is really going to be a challenge. But like the mayor said, echo all the fine work that was done by our first responders during the event. There were over 10,000 rescues and evacuations that had to be performed in Fort Bend County. And maybe not always you hear this, but the cooperation between the state of Texas Emergency Management Division, headed by NIMKID, and Tony Robinson from FEMA Region 6 were folks that were very accessible to us when we needed assistance to push through some of the issues we were facing.
Well, before that, I just wanted to follow up something with Jeff.
Yeah.
Fort Bend County has been the fastest growing county for a very long time. In Texas, you said there's been 3 major incidences. The Brazos River crested, first time it had in hundreds of years. So one of the questions I think for folks who live in that part of it, Fort Bend County, is there going to be some changes in terms of the development structure of it? Because part of the problem for us living here in Houston is we are the recipient in often cases of some of the issues that happen in the outerlying areas. But in Fort Bend is growing like leaps and bounds. You're going to add 1 million people within the next decade. How are you going to manage all that growth? And is this the beginning of a lot more flooding for you guys going forward unless you make some changes?
Well, let me say this. In emergency management, we're looking at obviously the consequences of what happens when drainage systems and things don't work. But the Fort Bend County commissioners and the engineers and the drainage district have actually been very proactive. We have one of the most restrictive development codes when it comes to how much property needs to be reserved to have detention. So we get a lot of complaints about why do we have to dig this hole in the ground? That I could put that to valuable use as property in a parking lot, and we don't allow them to do that. And we have had some opportunity because we're newer, so we don't have some of the density issues that have taken place in Houston and to our east. But the development, we're going to obviously, after any event like this, we're going to look at what went well and what can we improve on. We have a host of projects that we've now learned. It wasn't just the Brazos River that broke a record. It was the San Bernard River, which is on our west, and the Barker Reservoir, which had its own elevation, top height that it's ever seen. So that's a unique situation because that can go both ways, into the east or the west when there's a flooding.
You've got a bond election coming up this November. Are you guys going to redo it and add some more flood control in, or is that too early to tell?
Well, I think that bond issue's already been set by law, and I think it's a lot of mobility items, but definitely
always about mobility, aren't they?
There's a lot of people there, and they're about 30,000 a year come in. So we're going to be working. We're obviously, the mayor was talking about EPA and some of the folks you have to deal with. We need to be working with the Army Corps of Engineers and our other federal partners that have mitigation grants. We have a mitigation grant that's outstanding right now that would allow $17 million worth of buyouts in selected areas and structure elevations that would help mitigate these problems in the future. So we're going to be looking at doing more projects like that.
Okay, James Rodriguez, one of the things I think that was interesting that the nation got to see watching how our region reacted to this crisis was the lack of crime. And so if you could talk about your experience in Pasadena as to what happened when things went south.
Sure. We, the mayor and I actually lived at Pasadena up at the 6th floor in our offices for about 7 straight days, and we didn't go home. And but the mayor was very proactive in making sure that we implemented a curfew right off the bat to make sure that we had tools for our first responders, our police, to enforce. We also went to 12-hour shifts ahead of time, so we had enough personnel on the ground ready for the storm. Everything from emergency management planning was in place. We had our cars and our high water vehicles ready and fueled, ready to go. And we spent probably about 22, 23 hours the first night at our Office of Emergency Management. So this mayor was very proactive. He was very decisive, and I think that's the police officer in him that comes out. He gets to a situation, or you roll up to a scene and you assess the situation and you make determinations, good calls, decisions on the fly. And so I think that helped Pasadena.
Yeah, Mayor, you talk about, look at what's going around the country in terms of lawlessness, Dallas, St. Louis, Portland. People get out of control, the police, Berkeley. What does it tell us about how our citizens acted during this crisis?
Well,
compared to the rest of the country?
Compared to the rest of the country, our citizens are the best because during that storm, people stayed home just like they were instructed to do. And that helped us out unbelievably. It also helped them out, and they understood that. Even after that, once the rain stopped, we had so many people bringing donations to the city. We had no place to put it. We opened the city gym, and within 3 hours, the whole city gym was completely full of people donating stuff. We almost had to tell people to stop. But in Pasadena, we have a mall that Macy's just left. So what we did was we commandeered Macy's. We opened Macy's up, and within 5 hours of transferring the stuff from our gym to Macy's, the whole bottom floor of Macy's was completely full of donations.
Wow.
We had to open a Dillard's that left. The whole bottom floor of Dillard's was completely full of donations. We had 1,000 people at one given time, volunteers, working our centers from Macy's to Dillard's, giving out the things. So our citizens are outstanding, and that's the reason why the crime was down, because everybody really cares.
So I think for our viewers, sometimes they often forget Pasadena is not the Pasadena of when we were kids. It's one of the most diverse cities in Texas.
Absolutely.
And I want to talk a little bit about that diversity, because I think it's important to mention. We know that there's been some issues related to the fact that there are some folks who have had some hesitancy in terms of accessing services. How are you dealing with sort of folks who are in the undocumented community, Latinos who may feel like they can't access services out of fear?
Absolutely.
I know you both have talked about that, James, Mayor, if you could.
Sure.
Yes, I will, if I may. Our police chief, as soon as I became mayor, I put a new police chief in, Al Espinoza. He's been on the police department for 38 years. And I told him I want to make sure that the citizens of all throughout Pasadena realize that all citizens matter to us. And he has gone out along with myself, and we've talked to every citizen group that you can think of to let them know we're here for you. And the undocumented citizens, we want them to know, like, if a crime happens, please report the crime. We're not going to ask you if you're citizens. We want to get the bad guy off the street. And I think our message has really taken over, and it's a whole different conversation in Pasadena now.
Sure, and it's been real interesting coming from the city of Houston to the city of Pasadena, and I'll tell you what, everybody's been very welcoming and supportive of me coming over. But this mayor, he's not taking a lot of credit for the key appointments that he's made. The first ever Latino police chief in the city of Pasadena. The chief of staff appointment. There's never been a chief of staff nor a Hispanic chief of staff. So that goes to show you that his top two key administration officials are diverse and reflective of the demographics of the city. We've even instituted, per the mayor's directive, to have a translator there at our city council meetings now. So if anybody needs help, bilingual assistance, we have that, and it's there for every meeting that we have.
And have you found a reaction, James, from the community? That
Oh,
they feel that
absolutely.
they can feel like they can trust the first responders in the city, that they're not going to have a problem. Because they have a problem, you should report it, because that's best
Every
for
time
everybody.
I'm out in the community, people say thank you for what y'all are doing. Thanks to the mayor for including and thinking about us. There are a lot of issues and challenges, obviously, in the city, but we're working to address them. We're working to make sure that it's one Pasadena.
Absolutely.
Pasadena strong, and is what we
Was
like
that
to
your
say.
slogan?
It is now.
Pasadena, one
like it.
Pasadena. All right, Fort Bend County, Jeff. Also we didn't tell folks, you're also you're a professor here at University of Houston and teach emergency management, which is going to become a booming field, I think, in our area of the country, because I think we're going to have more issues. But as a result of what happened and what you've learned, are there any key initiatives you would like to see going forward that you think would help us solve this regional flooding problem?
Well, in terms of the Fort Bend County's issues, we're going to be looking at various mitigation projects, and some of those are infrastructure, hard bricks and mortar things that will improve channels, but I think we'll also be looking at regulations. We talked about that a minute ago, and our regulations are already pretty strict in terms of making developers kind of rise to the occasion in terms of preventing flooding in the future. Maybe we're going to look at something in that area as well. But one of the things that kind of tying into some of the last conversation is one of the things that happened during our flooding last year was we developed and worked with the community and came up with a long-term recovery group. That group is called Fort Bend Recovers, and Fort Bend Recovers probably represents about 38 or 40 nonprofit groups. and we kind of threw it together and worked with partners, mainly Mary Vasquez at the United Way and Terry Stewart, to put together this kind of coalition to work on things like case management, repair and rebuild, and spiritual and mental health. Such a difference this time to be kind of locked and ready to go with the community. And so when it came to basic needs issues, we didn't fill up a Macy's or a Dillard's, but we filled up a Tractor Supply that was out of business, and some great groups that delivered those resources. That's part of resiliency, is to have a population that loves their community and is willing to volunteer to do some work. In addition to, the money is good, we need the money, but the Fort Bend Recovers group gets a lot of credit for especially the challenge that we're going to have in the next year, 2 years. It takes a while. You have 7,000 individuals that have had damage in their homes.
And Gary, we'd be remiss in forgetting that Fort Bend County is the most diverse county in the
Yes.
United States of America.
Absolutely.
So, and I know there's tremendous amounts of outpouring in terms of support from all branches of the very diverse Fort Bend community.
Well, Judge Robert Aber,
Yeah.
who's my boss, but also the Sheriff Troy Nails, have done meetings in the community, and not so much the diversity, but the diversity, like 68 different languages, and the different faith-based groups that are based in Fort Bend County. When there are issues that are happening at a national level, it does mean we don't always react in Fort Bend County the way that some people might think, and it's kind of like Pasadena. I think there's it's mixed in with a Texan feel of how we do
Absolutely.
things in Texas, but with a respect for everybody's faith and diversity.
How did the school districts do? I know Fort Bend ISD, Lamar Consolidated had some issues, and as far as Pasadena ISD, how did you guys manage that process, and how do you guys work with the ISDs as well?
Okay, well, matter of fact, I couldn't go to a meeting today where we have our emergency management coordinators from across the county, the hospitals, and we meet on a monthly basis. We've been doing that for 15 years. The schools really rose to the occasion. Lamar Consolidated, Katy ISD, and Fort Bend ISD. They opened their schools readily to allow for shelters to be opened, to allow for donations to be collected. Their teachers jumped into it, their principals, the superintendents. It was really a whole, as they say in FEMA, the whole community. It was a whole community approach, and it was really nice. And we were kind of concerned because when things happened along the Brazos River last year, LCISD were mainly where it was affected. They opened their school, but it was the middle of summer. They didn't really have any pressing issues. This time, there was a thought that we're getting back to school really quickly, and it was really just a great partnership, and included the Red Cross as well, who used some of their facilities for shelter. So I really can't speak more highly of the schools in this emergency management issue. They also provided buses. We needed to move people across the community quickly in terms of evacuations, and in terms of working with the military that was in place, and they readily donated their buses to our inventory list.
Well, Mayor, the big issue hanging over all this is how we gonna pay for what we've got to have, because the truth is the 100-year, the 500-year floods are now yearly floods, and we could have another flood like this next week,
Absolutely.
6 weeks, next summer, and we're not ready for it.
No.
Part of the problem I've observed, and I'm sure you have too, is that the federal government's responsibility has been doled out piecemeal. I think the Brays Bayou project was supposed to be done by 2014.
Correct.
And now it's not going to be done until 2022. I don't know how you characterize it. I call it inexcusable. And I mean, so what can we do? We, meaning our viewers, you all as important officials, all three of you, what can we do to make sure the federal government steps to the plate and does its share now?
I wish I knew that answer. Call your congressman, call your senator, call the president of the United States. What else can we do?
You know, I was going to say,
Go ahead.
it's fascinating to look at what happened, because the estimated damage in the region is, what, 150 billion or north of that?
yes.
And what would it have cost, you're the expert, to do things right, to have a third reservoir, to make sure they're deep enough, to have the retention ponds, to take the homes that shouldn't have been built in the area and buy them out and turn it into floodplain? What's it going to cost? $3 billion? $5 billion?
And look what you say.
It's
you can't
like-
debate that.
Well, I think this is the opportunity for that discussion. A lot of times out of disaster, there's windows of opportunity to make corrections. for Fort Bend County, the reservoir issue is a big issue. It impacts us as much as it impacts Houston. And my boss, Judge Aiyer, is meeting with Congressman Ryan today
Great.
to talk about exactly the issue, the unique situation of the residents that live just adjacent to this reservoir. But it is amazing too to sit in meetings with folks from Corpus Christi all the way to Orange and then into Louisiana that have all had projects that have been on the board. You talk to the folks from Wharton. They've had projects that they wanted to mitigate the Colorado River, and they had the worst flooding. You have to understand, everything from Corpus Christi to Orange, every river and creek made a historic crest. And so in a meeting I was at the other day, we want to, we understand there's limits on how much federal money is, but we are going to be making our case for those projects. And obviously the reservoir issue for us is particularly important. We also have our, like I said, our hazard mitigation projects that we're going to be pushing that are through the programs that already exist.
Yeah, so they complain about the money, Jay, right?
exactly.
They don't want to fund it, but then the crisis happens, and what is the federal government going to shell out on this? 50
what
billion?
do we learn?
100
what do we
billion?
learn from Allison and from Ike? And are we utilizing, those were great lessons, they were painful lessons, but what have we done in terms of public policy and advancing those issues? And I think part of it too is getting people to go vote and holding people accountable, getting involved in these elections. That's what our viewers can do. That's what residents can do, stay involved and hold their leaders accountable. And we have to ask for that money, our fair share of money too.
Well, let's talk about that on
It
accountability.
would be cheaper if they paid for the program.
Sure. Right.
I mean, that's what the point is. It's not like it's like you pay us now or you pay us later.
Sure,
right?
absolutely. But let's think about this for a moment. We can't control what happens in Washington as much as we like to try.
Exactly.
But we do have elected officials in Austin, and we have a rainy day fund in Austin that exists. That's $11–12 billion filled. These are one-time projects. Have we talked to? Have you had any conversations with our delegation here as to the possibility of providing some state relief for some of these infrastructure projects? Because we know that will help, I think, unloosen some of the federal dollars if we can get the state to contribute some.
All our state reps from the Pasadena area we've met with several times, and they say the same thing you're saying. They're hitting the governor up. So
Representative Kane is in favor of this. This could be news.
I didn't say him.
No, didn't say him.
That's Gary's friend.
Yeah.
No, I
The
like
mayor's
him.
been in
Yeah.
constant,
Friends, I know
constant
you are.
communication with all of the delegation, and they've been helpful to where
Briscoe too, right?
Briscoe too.
Briscoe's
Yeah.
been helpful.
He
He's
has
a
been
good
very
man.
helpful.
I'm
yes.
sure he will help.
But exactly, we're on contact with everybody that we can be in contact with to see what we can do to get money.
And I think the other point too is this is a regional problem.
Right,
This
exactly.
We're all in this together. It's not a red or
Even
a blue.
the coastal dike's a good time to
Absolutely.
be thinking about this.
Sure.
I mean, we're looking at what, $3–4 billion, but what's that going to save? Hundreds and hundreds of.
When it's 150 billion to clean up from this mess or more, the numbers don't have no meaning. It really doesn't
Exactly
because
right.
it's so
Well-
cheap. It's a bargain.
Well, the issue is, and you asked the question earlier, usually for every dollar you spend in mitigation and doing something, you save $4 on the back end. That's been proven by scientifically and all the formulas and stuff. So, we need to look at that. It's just hard to do it when it's a blue sky day, and there's a lot of opportunities for there's a lot of things, a lot of wants that people have, and planning for the next disaster is sometimes not the highest priority.
Well, this is an important issue because I know Fort Bend County is open for business, Pasadena is open for business. We want people to recognize that it's a big part of that, and we want to have economic development continue in these areas.
Well, and also that we can do it right.
Correct.
And end up saving federal government and state government a whole lot of money down the line,
Absolutely.
or maybe next week.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, we've enjoyed this opportunity to get to talk a little bit about some of your recovery efforts. It's been a wonderful experience. Jeff, good luck with your efforts out in Fort Bend County. James, Mayor, thank you so much for your amazing job that you're doing out in Pasadena.
Well, and I do think one thing we've learned is that Harvey didn't affect the city of Houston. It affected our whole area.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you. I personally want to thank you for coming. Catch us next time on Red, White, and Blue right here on TV8. We'll be here next week.